Good afternoon, and welcome to this session on the 2021 Florida Legislative Session. Our presenter is Dorene Barker, the Associate State Director for AARP Florida. Dorene earned her JD at Florida State University College of Law. After graduation, she volunteered as an emeritus attorney for seniors and received numerous community service awards, including recognition by Governor Lawton Chiles for pro bono legal representation. Dorene was the legislative director for Florida Legal Services for nearly 20 years, as well as an adjunct professor at FSU College of Law. At AARP Florida, she focuses her attention on housing, predatory lending, telehealth, Medicaid, and long-term care. Thank you for joining us today, Dorene.
Thanks, Kathy. Pleasure to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to tune in to the 2021 legislative update. As Kathy said, my name is Dorene Barker, and I'm an Associate State Director for AARP Florida. My presentation will include bills that I have worked on this past session, and also bills that were worked on by my colleagues. Our advocacy team members are Zane Smith, Yvonne Fernandez, Laura Cantwell, Lynn Smith, and our manager, Jack McCrae. I'm going to start my discussion in just a moment, but wanted to just mention that I would appreciate if we could save the questions for the end of the presentation. One of my areas of focus is on the budget, and I'm sure that's an area that not everyone's very familiar with, so I'm just going to briefly explain the different components. The General Appropriations Act is the budget part that actually sets forth the amounts of monies that will be allocated for services, and that is Senate Bill 2500. The bill that actually implements that is Senate Bill 2502, and the implementing bill is only good for 1 year. And then there are conforming bills that actually provide statutory changes to accommodate the General Appropriations Act. Nearly a year into the pandemic, Governor DeSantis presented his recommended budget, and it included a 3.6% increase. At the time, the legislature was anticipating between a $3 to $5 billion deficit. And I believe it's an understatement to say that the influx of federal dollars identified below saved our state from making drastic cuts to both Medicaid and education. And just to keep the process interesting, consideration of those federal dollars happened near the end of session, but luckily before conference. So looking at the General Appropriations Act, going to share issues that were impacted by the budget and that we pay close attention to. And those impacts to general appropriations include the statewide Medicaid, managed care, long-term care, which will receive funding in an increase of $173 million. Those services include, among other things, adult daycare, assisted living, caregiving training, hospice services, and more. Another area is the Alzheimer's Disease Initiative, and they will receive nearly $7 million to serve 582 persons with Alzheimer's and their families. Moving on, we will look at community care for the elderly. It's a non-Medicaid program that will receive more than $7 million in funding to serve 865 persons. CCE provides community-based services to help functionally impaired elders ages 60 plus live in the least restrictive and most cost-effective environments to forestall or prevent nursing home placement. And finally, the Home Care for the Elderly program did not receive a funding increase, and this is the second year in a row that it did not receive any increases. The conforming bills that we're looking at, the first one we'll talk about is Senate Bill 2512. It's documentary stamp distributions. I'm sure most of you have heard or are familiar with affordable housing in Florida and the Sadowski Act. Unfortunately, this session, they only allocated $141 million of those funds to go to affordable housing. And then the Resiliency and Water Protection and Sustainability Trust Funds will equally share the remaining 2/3 at 141 million each. So those were some drastic cuts. And the only shining light from that is that they proposed to stop the sweep of affordable housing monies from the trust funds into general revenue. And then Senate Bill 2518 is another conforming bill. It relates to healthcare, and this conforming legislation continues Medicaid state option benefits for chiropractic, hearing, optometric, and podiatric and visual services. Sorry, those are tongue twisters. It requires nursing homes to submit comprehensive financial reports each fiscal year. It eliminates the nursing home Medicaid reimbursement rate freeze, eliminates over-the-counter drug benefits for adults, and makes statutorily permanent the retroactive Medicaid eligibility period. Finally, this legislation authorizes the Agency for Healthcare Administration to review applications and contract with organizations to provide program for all-inclusive care, PACE, comprehensive long-term care services to persons who would otherwise be eligible for nursing home care. More than 2,000 residents in need of assistance stand to receive PACE services under this bill. Moving on to our substantive bills that we supported and passed. The first one is the Office of Minority Health and Health Equity, House Bill 183 by Representatives Brown and Joseph and Senator Rousseau under Senate Bill 404. For too long, discrimination and systemic racism has served as barriers to health equity for minority and underserved populations. House Bill 183 is a good roadmap for developing and promoting and implementing policies, programs, and practices to increase health equity. A bill that we opposed that passed and is central to a lot of our work that was done this session is the Personal Care Attendance Bill. This was Senate Bill 1132 and House Bill 485, sponsored by Senator Bean and Representatives Garrison and Rayner. The legislation makes permanent the PCA training program created by executive order to address workforce issues presented during the COVID pandemic. The legislation requires 16 hours of classroom training and 0 hours of supervised clinical training before they can have contact with nursing home residents. Certified nursing assistants are required to have 80 hours of classroom training and 40 hours of supervised legal training before they have contact. This has an impact on the minimum staffing standards that are currently in statute that require 2.5 hours per resident per day. The facilities seek to replace the certified nursing assistants with the less trained PCAs on a one-to-one basis so that they will count towards the minimum staffing, although they don't have the same training or skills that CNAs have. It effectively lowers nursing home staffing standards and heightens risk of lower quality care. Those effects likely will exacerbate the loss of consumer confidence in the nursing home industry. And moving on, another bill that we focused on was services for veterans and their families, House Bill 231 and Companion Bill 260, sponsored by Representative Zika and Senator Harrell. We supported this bill, and this legislation establishes the Florida Veterans Care Coordination Program to provide veterans and their families dedicated behavioral health, dedicated health care referral services for mental health and substance abuse. To our next issue relates to the PACE program, as I mentioned earlier. And this bill is House Bill 905 and Companion Bill 1242. It was supported by us and passed, and it requires the Agency for Healthcare Administration to oversee and monitor the PACE program in consultation with the Department of Elder Affairs. Another issue that we worked on was electronic legal documents. It's House Bill 483 and Senate Bill 848, sponsored by Representative Altman and Senator Powell. This legislation requires an online notary to verify a principal's and witnesses' identities for any electronic record. Next is Elder-Focused Dispute Resolution Process. This is House Bill 441 and Companion Bill 368, sponsored by Representative Haig and Senator Baxley. Supported by AARP, it too passed. The legislation creates an alternative dispute resolution option for court-appointed elder caring coordinators to assist elders, legal representatives, and their families to resolve high conflict disputes that impact elders' safety and autonomy. Next is Protection of Elderly Persons and Disabled Adults, House Bill 1041 and Companion Bill 1344, sponsored by Representative Burton and Senator Burgess. We supported this as well. This legislation criminalizes any attempt to exploit seniors by expanding the Attorney General's jurisdiction to include authority over crimes against elders and disabled adults. The legislation prohibits any person who is convicted in the state or foreign jurisdiction of abuse, neglect, or exploitation or manslaughter of an elderly disabled person from serving as a personal representative or from inheriting from the victim's estate, trust, or other beneficiary assets. Another bill closely related is attorney compensation. This is House Bill 625 and Senate Bill 954, sponsored by Representative Yarborough and Senator Bean. It relates, as the title indicates, or creates a series of disclosures an attorney must provide when seeking to represent a personal representative in a probate proceeding or trust administration. The disclosure must state that the attorney fee is not required to be based on the value of the estate or trust and may be subject to negotiation, and the selection of the attorney is at the discretion of the personal representative or trustee. Next, we are looking at utility services issues. House Bill 19 and Senate Bill 1128, the preemption over restriction of utility services. And basically what the title indicates, the state will prohibit a municipality, county, special district, or political subdivision from enacting any resolution or ordinance or rule that will take action or restrict or prohibit the effects of using any type of fuel or fuel sources of energy production, which may be used, delivered, converted, or supplied by utility companies. Next is taxation, probably an issue that most of you are familiar with. Senate Bill 50 and Companion Bill 15, sponsored by Senators Gruters and Representative Clemens, pardon me. Another bill that we supported that passed. The legislation requires online sellers to collect sales tax and remit it to the state. It will apply to online retailers whose sales exceed 100,000 in the prior year. This will provide an estimated $1 billion in annual revenue that can be used to replenish the Unemployment Compensation Trust Fund until it returns to pre-pandemic levels. Next, we're going to look at broadband infrastructure, a bill that AARP supported and was passed. The legislation will expand broadband internet access to rural and underserved areas in Florida. It requires the Office of Broadband to develop short-term and long-term goals and strategies to increase the availability of these services. This is a bill that did not pass that AARP supported, and it was titled Consumer Finance Loans, Senate Bill 1478 and House Bill 895. It was a very good consumer bill sponsored by Senator Gibson and Representative Stevenson, and it would have prohibited prepayment penalties for consumer finance loans. And it would require all consumer loans, including refinances, have a minimum loan term of 6 months. As most of you are familiar, those high cost, high risk loans usually have very short terms and make them nearly impossible to repay. So this would have gone a long way in protecting consumers. The next issue is improvements to real property and resiliency energy environmental Florida. These are actually both PACE bills. They were renamed because of the negative connotation that PACE has, not only in Florida, across the country. PACE stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, and as many of you are probably familiar, these are those loans made to homeowners, often from folks who walk door to door, and they're financed through the non-ad valorem tax assessments. And so they've had lots of problems, lots of publicity issues against the programs. I think even the Tampa Bay area by ordinance had stopped their use in the area. So we were happy to see that bill fail. We opposed it, and we attempted to make amendments to the bill, but the sponsor was not agreeable. So moving on. Another bill that we worked on that falls under the livable communities area was homestead exemption for older adults over 65. Senate Bill 1256 and Companion Bill 597, sponsored by Senator Polsky and Representative Woodson. AARP supported this legislation. It changes the process for a senior to use it, that a senior uses to verify his income for purposes of receiving certain income-based homestead property tax exemptions. The legislation removes the annual requirement to submit a sworn statement and requires the person to notify the property appraiser by May 1 if there is a change in income that may result in disqualification. And another bill under community relates to traffic and pedestrian safety. It was the Purple Alert Bill, Senate Bill 184 and Companion Bill 79, sponsored by Senator Berman and Representative Casella. And this legislation established the Purple Alerts to assist in finding missing adults with developmental disabilities and brain injuries, but not related to Alzheimer's disease, dementia, or substance abuse. So that's the end of my list. I am happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions. And going back to what you said earlier on House Bill 485, personal care attendance, why did AARP decide to oppose that bill, and were y'all by yourself in opposing that bill?
We were not by ourselves. There were several other groups, including those that represent workers like SIEU and the ombudsman, all opposed it along with us. And we're not opposed to nursing homes having apprentices, those folks that come in and help, but they don't count towards the minimum staffing. You know, the industry was very vocal in their thoughts regarding their healthcare heroes, and we agree that they provided an invaluable service. You know, they went above and beyond. Many of them actually stayed in facilities during the height of the pandemic, and we would never question, you know, anybody's motives or thoughts around that. But The truth is that the facilities don't treat their current certified nursing assistants very well. They are underpaid, overworked, and they most of them don't even receive benefits. No vacation leave, no sick leave. So our thought would be if you're going to make changes, improve how you take care of your current workers. And if you're going to use PCAs, that's fine, but don't count them towards the minimum staffing, because the minimum staffing standards are actually the best indicator of quality in nursing home facilities.
Okay, thank you. Couple more questions for you.
Sure.
What was AARP's position on the civil liability protection legislation at Senate Bill 72?
We oppose that legislation. It made drastic changes to the way that older adults and their families could seek remedy to negligent acts. They raised the level to requiring grossly negligent instead of ordinary negligence. And the immunity was given to everyone, given to businesses and schools and churches and all healthcare providers, doctors, and those facilities that have nurses. And so it was very, very widespread, far-reaching, and it will have a very detrimental impact on people who are hurt and cannot go to the courts and get their actions addressed.
So did you say that bill, the Senate Bill 72, did it pass or not this year?
It did pass.
Oh,
it did pass,
okay.
Unfortunately.
Okay. All right. So this was probably a pretty crazy different year. You've been working in legislative sessions for, as we said in the beginning, over 20 years. And probably this was one of the more unusual sessions because of the pandemic. And I'm sure there were some different requirements, but did you even get an opportunity to offer testimony to the committees, go up to the session and meet with representatives or the senators?
We did not have any in-person meetings or any in-person presentations of testimony. There was an opportunity for advocates to go to the Civic Center and present testimony from there to the committees. However, AARP has travel restrictions on all of its staff, so we were not permitted to have any in-person meetings. Everything that we did virtually.
Yeah, that's quite a bit different for someone who is works at or lobbies the legislature, isn't it?
It was very different. It was difficult. Surprisingly, it's so much easier to talk with someone either walking the halls or in their office and to explain your position. When you have to write your testimony, you have to be you have to be very careful how you word it and make sure that it's the right tone. And it was different.
Well, probably you're hoping that next year we'll go back to the usual.
I am.
Okay, we have one more question, Dorene. Somebody says, I heard that Florida might be considering the 10% FMAP, federal medical assistance percentage increase for HCBS, home and community-based services. But if they didn't put that in the budget this year, is it too late?
It is not. The legislature, it has asked for more guidance in relation to this. When they receive the guidance that they're looking for and it satisfies what they need, they can instruct the Agency for Healthcare Administration to create a budget amendment and submit that. And then the money can be allocated through the Legislative Budget Commission. They are scheduled to meet in mid-September for their long-range planning, and they could take that up at that time and actually allocate those monies towards those permitted Medicaid expenditures for home and community-based services.
Okay, and is that something that AARP supports or is in favor of?
Absolutely. We have communicated our position to all the legislative members as well as the governor's office.
Okay,
that we
well,
support it.
thank you. And we don't have any more questions. Do you have any last words or will we sign off?
We'll sign off.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thank AARP for joining us today. And bye-bye.